Hello everyone, and welcome to another video Dvar with Rabbi Chaitovsky here at BMH-BJ. I want to dedicate this Dvar Torah to my former students from the Shoshana Cardin School, and once they hear this, they'll know why it's being dedicated to them. We happen to spend quite a bit of time learning this particular topic that I'm going to be talking about today. It's a topic that finds itself in the first of our two Torah portions this morning, or Shabbat morning, Behar-Behukkotai. The first one, Behar, lays out the laws of Shemitah, the sabbatical year when fields lie fallow, and the law of the Yovel, the Jubilee year, which is in the 50th year after a cycle of 7 Shemitah years. There's a 50th year in which land is returned to original owners, debts are forgiven, and the economy is righted, at least in the ideal vision of the Torah. Right after it lays out those two magnificent series of laws, we find the following verse. If you buy or sell anything to your fellow, al tonu ish et achiv, the buyer should not harass or cheat, or the seller, I should say, should not cheat or misrepresent the item that is being sold to the buyer. And of course, we know that is, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to recognize that simply is a bedrock of good business. You can't cheat your customers, you can't misrepresent your items, everything has to be above board. The issue is that just 3 verses later, in that same chapter, chapter 25, verse 17, it says, V'lo tonu ish et amito. A person should not oppress or harass his neighbor, his fellow. And the rabbis, ever sensitive to the verses in the Torah repeating themselves, wondered why would there be 2 verses about the same topic, saying essentially the same thing, within 3 lines of each other. It just seems to be a little bit too much, too soon. But the rabbis very perceptively answered that we're actually talking about 2 different kinds, or 2 different scenarios where oppression may take place. And let me share with you their take on it right from the Mishnah in the tractate Bava Metzia. In the 4th chapter of Bava Metzia, we have the following Mishnah, a very famous Mishnah. It says, Kishem sha'ona'ah b'mekach u'memkar, just as there is oppression or cheating or harassment in buying and selling, kach ona'ah bidvarim, so there is also verbal oppression. How did the rabbis understand this? They looked at the 2 verses. One of them clearly is in the context of buying and selling. So they said, that's business, and you have to be above board and honest in your business dealings. They looked at the second verse, 3 verses later, and said there's no context to that verse. It's a general thing, and they said it refers to verbal harassment, verbal oppression. And the examples they give, I think, are very, very important. One of them is, don't walk into a store. Lo yomar, when you walk into a store, do not say, Bekama chevet zeh. How much is this? V'hu eino ratzeh likach. But the buyer knows that he's not really a buyer. He's not going to buy anything. He's just there to waste the salesperson's time. Don't do that. That's verbal harassment. Another example, Im haya bal teshuvah, if a friend of yours happens to be a returnee to Judaism, someone who's newly religious, lo yomar lo, do never say to him or her, Zachar ma'asecha harishonim, I remember you when you were eating things you shouldn't have eaten, when you were doing things you shouldn't have done. It's no one's business. It's embarrassing to the person. You wouldn't want to say it to them privately. You wouldn't want to say it to them if you're having a dinner party, and you certainly wouldn't want to say it to them when they're not around and you're just talking about them. Oh, remember when he did this? You should never do that. That's verbal oppression. Somebody once said, "Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me." That's really not true. Words can cut even more deeply and can have a much longer lasting effect than even the sharpest or hardest stick or stone. And we should keep that in mind in our interpersonal relationships, and we should keep that in mind in our business relationships as well. A beautiful thought from this morning's Torah portion about ona'ah bidvarim, verbal oppression. Shabbat shalom, and we'll see you in Shul.